Welcome to another episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast. Today, we're going to answer a question we get all the time from newer investors in our community. And that question is, I've chosen my first market. I've been looking for properties to buy in that market, and I really haven't found anything. How do I know when I should be switching markets or even adding a second market? So let's start out by talking about why we think it's so important to really focus on one market in the very beginning when you're starting to invest.
Yeah, it's really about the power of focus. And one of the benefits of focusing on a market is that it's going to be easier for you to build really strong relationships. And your investor agent is one source of really great deals. And just think about it. If your agent knows that you're focused on another market, working with agents in those markets, you're not spending a lot of time in their market, they're not going to be as interested in sending you great deals. They're going to send those deals to investors who are really focused in their market.
So it's not only the relationships that can be hurt if you're investing in multiple markets at the same time, but also you're not going to gain the knowledge and the expertise in that market. So whenever you go into a new market to invest, you're really going to understand, you're going to want to understand the macroeconomics. You want to understand, where's the population moving to? You're going to want to understand, who are the really great contractors? You're going to want to understand where are the really great neighborhoods. There's all this information that you really want to get a deep understanding of the market to be able to be a successful investor. And when you are spreading out your time across, let's say, 3 different markets, you're not going to spend the time to go as in depth in the neighborhoods and figuring out where the path of progress is and looking at the economics that are driving different market decisions and different market movements. And so you're not going to be able to really gain the knowledge that actually ultimately not only is going to help you be successful, but also helps you reduce risk. Because if you can pick someplace where what we call is the path of progress, where people are moving to, or where the city maybe is putting in some money to revitalize that area, then you're setting yourself up to get more likely market appreciation. And that can really help you to not only be able to have greater returns, but also to mitigate risk if you make other investment choices that aren't quite as good as you expected with a property.
Yeah, I think another important point to point out here is that we have come to believe that you can really make any market work. And so this idea that, okay, I've put in some time in this market and I haven't found any deals, should I switch markets, right? If you believe that any market can work, then the market you're in, you can make it work as long as, number one, you build those relationships and you gain that expertise about your market. One other thing I wanted to mention is that some of that expertise is that hidden value that we've talked about in other episodes. What that is, if you missed that episode, is hidden value is the opportunities that other people don't see in that market. It's a pattern of opportunity that if you tap into it, then you can make more cash flow, you can force appreciation on that property, and that's how you make money in real estate. So finding that hidden value takes time. Sometimes you have to look at hundreds of properties in your market over a long period of time to spot some of those hidden value opportunities. And that's why again, time in market is so important.
Yeah, and if you believe that any market can work, then it's really not a matter of, hey, I chose the wrong market, or this is a bad market. It's actually, you just need to be more creative, right? You need to have the right relationships, you need to look for hidden value, and you need to be more creative. Because there are some markets that are a little bit more challenging. Like, for example, if you were to choose a high cost of living market where there's a lot of people already investing there, that's maybe going to be more challenging than if you go to a place in the Midwest, for example, where you can get a lower cost per unit, and maybe your money is going to go a little bit farther, and maybe it's not as popular location to invest, so maybe there are a few less investors. So there are going to be some markets that are more challenging that you'll have to be more creative to be able to create cash flow. But nonetheless, again, this was a limiting belief of Kenji and mine. We thought that there were really some ideal markets for people to invest in, and we've seen so many people succeed in every single market that we no longer say that there are any markets that don't work, even in California.
Yeah, another mindset piece that I wanted to share with you with a story is that we had a student who came to us and said, I've been looking in this market forever and I've tried everything. Right. And so I challenged him on that. I said, did you really try everything? And he said, yes, I've tried everything. Right. And he was so adamant about the fact that he had tried absolutely everything. But when you really dig in, right, that was a belief that he had, right? A belief that he had tried everything, that there were no opportunities in that market. He had to change markets. But when you really dug into it and started questioning, like, well, what about this? What about this? You come to find out that he didn't try everything. And so one of the things that I think is really helpful in these situations where feel like you've tried everything, because I know that that's how you can feel, is to say, okay, what else can I do? And you can try something. If that doesn't work, you try something else. If that doesn't work, you try something else, and you keep doing that, right? But the key is to not just stop and kind of accept that, or hold on to this belief that you've tried everything.
And sometimes doing more actually means finding more who's. And so oftentimes what we'll see is people will say, hey, I've been in this market, it's been 3 months, nothing's working. And we'll say, well, how many agents are feeding you deals? And they'll say, maybe one. And actually, you could have multiple agents feeding you deals, right? Are you maybe building relationships with others who have access to deals? How many relationships have you made with property managers or contractors, or maybe some estate attorneys, or maybe some wholesalers? Like, there's so many people who have access to deals, but what people often do is they'll get one agent and they'll be limited by the number of deals that agent sends them. And then, of course, they're looking for deals on their own, but they're not tapping into a lot more resources and getting deals fed to them from a lot of different people. And so, having said all that, when should you actually switch markets? Well, our criteria for that is when you're truly a badass in your market, meaning you really understand the neighborhoods, you understand the population trends, where's the path of progress, you spend some time really understanding your market demographics very, very deeply. You understand when you're running cash and cash calculators, what the rents are going to be in that place, even without looking it up. You actually have such a sense because you run so many cash and cash calculators. And we'd even suggest maybe actually putting in some offers, because when you put in offers in your market, you get a deeper sense of that market, because now you're going deep into those neighborhoods and you're looking at them at a different level because you put in an offer.
Yeah, and to kind of really summarize that, the first thing is you've really learned your market, right? And that comes with everything that Leti talked about, knowing the rents by heart, knowing the different neighborhoods. Maybe you even spotted a number of patterns of hidden value that we just talked about. Number two is you've built a great team and you have really great relationships with them, right? And so your team, might consist of investor agents, property managers, contractors, maybe even cleaners, handymen, right? If you're buying a short-term rental. And so we're talking about a really, really great team that is there. Like, once you do buy a property, they're going to be there for you, and they're going to take care of your property. And then, as Leti said, the third thing is really having put in multiple offers, I think is really important, because if you've never put in an offer, you won't realize this, but once you put in an offer, you'll see that the learning curve after you've put in that offer is so steep. It's a whole nother level of education that you will be missing out on if you don't put in an offer. I think the other really important thing about putting in an offer is that it makes you really pay attention to all those other things we talked about. We talked about learning your market and building your team. You'll realize the deficiencies in those two areas once you put in an offer, because that's when your team is tested. That's when your knowledge of your market is really tested. And that's when you really need to know, that's when you really need to have that depth of knowledge of that market when you put in that offer.
The other thing that you actually get from putting in an offer is you get your team on your side. So many real estate agents have investors who are tire kickers, and they say that they are interested in buying properties, but then they go all this time and they don't actually buy a property, and they're just, tire kicking, meaning that they are asking questions or they're asking to learn something, and maybe they're looking at properties, but they just don't take any action. When you start to take action, you've already differentiated yourself from a lot of the other investors that the agent deals with. And so if you're putting in those offers in properties and you're not getting those offers accepted, or maybe you get a property offer accepted and you go and you negotiate and it doesn't work out and the deal falls through, now the agent sees you as an action taker. The agent knows that you're really going to follow through and that you're actually really interested in buying a property or even multiple properties. They're going to show up differently for you because now they take you with a different level of seriousness. So that's another really important reason to start putting in offers, because it changes the dynamics between you and your team. and they start to show up differently for you, and actually may increase the access that you get to other deals because you've put in some offers on some deals.
Yeah, and we've seen that too. We've seen people who have put in an offer and that deal fell through. But then soon after, that agent, let's say, gets an off-market deal and they offer it to you, right? Because they may feel bad because you didn't get that other deal. That fell through. And so they're like, oh, and then you're also very top of mind for them. You've just been working on a transaction for several weeks. And so, they find this, they have this other deal and they give it to you. And so you get access. And we've seen this multiple times with former students where, like I said, they put in offers, it fell through, and they got a deal soon after.
So really, just to summarize, when should you actually think about switching your market? First of all, we believe every single market works. And so go in with that philosophy of every market works. I just need to be creative. I need to look for ways to make it work. Second of all, you really want to have a deep understanding of the neighborhoods, the demographics, and really be at this place where you've run enough cash on cash calculations so that you know what the rents are going to be in all the different areas. Third, you've had a really great relationship with your team. You have your agents, you have your contractors, you have other members of your team. And you've really spent the time to get to know them personally and professionally, and also to form those deep relationships, and they want to work with you. Fourth of all, make sure that you've put in some offers, right? So you've developed a deeper knowledge of the market, and also your team has that experience working with you, and that's going to make you a lot more successful. And at that point, we would say don't switch markets, add a market. Okay. And so that's a difference. When you switch markets, the idea is you take away all of your focus on that other market and you're completely switching to another market. Well, you've just done all that work and you've put all those resources in and you have those relationships. Why wouldn't you continue to maintain that market relationships? And you never know, a deal might come to you a couple weeks later. And if you would completely switch markets and say, hey, I'm cutting off that other market, you would have missed that deal. So, once you've gone through like Zero to Freedom, our courses, you have the ability to invest in multiple markets at once. And oftentimes what we see is a lot of our investors buy long-term rentals and short-term rentals and mid-term rentals, and they're buying in different markets across the country. We personally have done that as well. So you have that ability to do that. And so what we'd suggest at that point is, hey, if one market hasn't resulted in any deals yet, and it's been several months and you've done all those pieces, then add a second market. And, build the team and develop that expertise and create those deep relationships and maybe put in some offers there. You can have two markets going at once because you now have the knowledge and you've put in the work in the first market. Why go and lose that?
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you in the next episode.